It was an early morning in downtown Chicago, and Ava Mitchell, a federal prosecutor, was already awake when the alarm on her phone went off at 6:30 a.m. Although she wasn't due in court until 9 a.m., her years of working as a prosecutor had taught her the value of preparation. Her small but neat apartment in the heart of the city reflected her organized nature, case files neatly stacked on her desk. A suit always ready for court the night before. But today wasn't a typical day. Ava wasn't heading to the federal courthouse, where she usually commanded the respect of colleagues and judges. Today, she was attending a simple municipal court hearing to dispute a parking ticket she believed had been wrongly issued. It was meant to be a quick, routine appearance, nothing more. Dressed casually, Ava wore a navy blue blazer over a white blouse and black pants. As she stood in front of the bathroom mirror, she adjusted her natural hair, something she had recently embraced after years of straightening it. At 35, she exuded the quiet confidence of someone who had graduated at the top of her class from a prestigious law school and earned her position in the U.S. Attorney's Office. After grabbing a banana and her travel mug filled with coffee, Ava walked to her car, a sleek Mercedes she had recently purchased as a reward for winning a major corruption case. She admired the car, though she often noticed the surprised glances from onlookers when they saw a young black woman stepping out of such an expensive vehicle. The drive to court was smooth, and Ava wasn't worried. She had left plenty of time to arrive by 9 a.m. With NPR on the radio, she mentally reviewed the evidence she had for her parking dispute. The ticket had been issued for a spot where the signs were contradictory, and she had photographs to prove it. But just as she was nearing the courthouse, her car's Bluetooth system buzzed with an incoming call. The display showed it was from her boss, the U.S. Attorney. Ava's heart skipped a beat. A call directly from him usually meant something urgent. "Ava, I'm sorry to call you so early." The voice of her boss crackled through the speakers. "We've got a situation with the Johnson trafficking case. The defense just filed a last-minute motion that could derail the prosecution. I need your eyes on this ASAP." Ava's pulse quickened. The Johnson case was one of the biggest human trafficking cases in Chicago's history. If the motion wasn't handled swiftly, it could change the course of the trial. "I'm on it, sir. What's the timeline?" "The judge has given us until noon to respond," he replied. "I'm sending you the documents now. Can you look them over and call me back with your thoughts?" "Absolutely," Ava responded, even though her mind was already racing. She had planned to park at 8:30 a.m. to give herself time to find the correct courtroom. Now, she had to figure out how to pull over and review the motion without being late for her 9 a.m. hearing. She pulled into the parking lot of a small coffee shop, found a space, and set up her laptop. As she connected it to her phone's hotspot, she began reading through the complex legal arguments in the defense's motion. The legal issues were dense, and she took copious notes. Time passed quickly as she worked diligently, but when she glanced at the clock, she realized it was 8:50 a.m. The courthouse was still 10 minutes away, and parking would take additional time. Ava quickly called her boss back to discuss her analysis and promised a more thorough review after her court appearance. She was frustrated but focused. She had never been late to court before, and the idea of being late was not one she took lightly. Yet, she also knew her job as a federal prosecutor came with responsibilities that couldn't be ignored. The Johnson case was too important. By the time Ava arrived at the municipal court parking lot, it was 9:10 a.m. She hurried toward the building, and as she did, she saw a text from her boss thanking her for the quick analysis. At least the delay had served a critical purpose. What she didn't know, as she walked toward the courthouse steps, was that her slightly tardy arrival would soon ignite a chain of events that would expose deep-seated prejudices in the very system she had devoted her life to serving. Judge Henry Roberts, 62, was known for his stern demeanor and rigid adherence to the rules. He had spent over 30 years on the bench, cultivating an air of authority that made his courtroom one of the most disciplined in the city. Judge Roberts had a reputation for quick judgments and harsh penalties for those who arrived late. For him, tardiness was a sign of disrespect for the law itself. At exactly 9 a.m., Judge Roberts entered the courtroom with practiced precision. He swiftly began calling the first few cases, moving through them with efficiency. Ava slipped into the back of the room at 9:15 a.m., trying to make her presence as discreet as possible. But Judge Roberts immediately stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the woman who dared to walk in late. "Step forward," he ordered sharply, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. Ava walked to the front, standing tall despite the hostile reception. "You must be Ava Mitchell," Judge Roberts said coldly, his eyes scanning the clock. "Scheduled for 9 a.m. You're late. Do you think your time is more important than the court's time?" Before Ava could speak, he continued, his voice growing louder. "In this courtroom, we have rules. We don't make exceptions. Time is precious. You clearly think it doesn't apply to you." Ava remained calm, her posture straight, though the words stung. She felt the weight of the injustice, the assumptions that had already been made about her, even though she had not been given the chance to explain. The judge hadn't even looked at her credentials, her professional attire, or the documents in her hand. The room fell silent, and Ava could sense the tension building. As the judge lectured her about the importance of punctuality, a few others in the room glanced around uncomfortably. A white businessman who had arrived 5 minutes late had been barely noticed. Ava, however, was being treated differently. Judge Roberts, determined to make an example of her, announced, "Perhaps a fine will help you remember the importance of punctuality." His gavel came down with finality. Ava stood her ground, not moving an inch. She had faced prejudice before, but this was different. This was clear abuse of power in real time, and she was not going to let it go unnoticed. She stood silently, taking in every detail of the interaction, the judge's tone, his dismissive gestures, the uncomfortable glances of the people in the courtroom. Ava was used to handling criminals in federal court. But this was personal. Judge Roberts leaned forward in his chair, his face reddening with frustration. "You're fined $500 for contempt," he declared, his voice dripping with condescension. He paused, letting the amount sink in. The fine was one of the highest he had imposed all year. But he didn't mention that. Ava remained still, her face unreadable. The other defendants in the room shifted in their seats. A white woman who had also arrived late looked at the judge nervously. But he said nothing to her. Ava could feel the weight of the injustice, but she was determined to stand her ground. But Ava wasn't finished. As she reached into her bag to retrieve her credentials, the entire room seemed to pause. She pulled out her leather portfolio, the gold seal of the United States Department of Justice catching the light. She held it up for all to see. "Your Honor," she said with a calm but firm voice. "Before we continue, I'd like to properly introduce myself for the record." She placed her badge on the podium. "I am Assistant U.S. Attorney Ava Mitchell, Northern District of Illinois." The impact was immediate. Judge Roberts froze, his face draining of color. He stared at her, finally seeing the truth. Ava wasn't just any late defendant, she was a federal prosecutor. And he had just humiliated her in front of the entire courtroom. Ava continued, her voice unwavering. "I'm late because I had to review a last-minute motion in the Johnson trafficking case. I have confirmation from my office, and I'm happy to provide that to the court. I also have documentation of the patterns of disparate treatment I've observed in this courtroom." The room fell silent. The judge, who moments ago had felt all-powerful, now seemed small. Ava had turned the tables completely. She had not only revealed his bias, but she had set the stage for real change in the system. Judge Roberts stammered, trying to backtrack. I wasn't aware of your position, Ms. Mitchell. If I had known, I would have." Ava interrupted. "Your Honor, it's not about my position. It's about the equal application of justice. The way you've treated me today, the way you've treated others in this courtroom, it's not just. It's a pattern." The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Ava's firm stance had turned the entire situation into a fight for something much larger than herself. She was not just defending herself, she was standing up for everyone who had been wronged in this system. By the end of the day, the story of Ava Mitchell's stand in Judge Roberts' courtroom spread like wildfire throughout Chicago's legal community. Her courage had sparked a larger conversation about racial bias in the courts. And what had started as a simple parking ticket dispute would soon lead to reforms that would reshape the way justice was served. Ava's actions didn't just expose the prejudice in one judge's courtroom, they ignited a movement. People began speaking out, sharing their own stories, and the fight for true justice began. This story is now adapted and expanded to fit a 15-minute video format. complete with character changes and location modifications suitable for an American audience. The narrative focuses on Ava's courage, professionalism, and determination to challenge injustice.